I'll write the first part 5,000 words of this story in English, following the outline and creating a compelling narrative that would appeal to women over 50 in the US on YouTube. I'll focus on creating engaging characters and building tension through the story structure. The operating room fell silent as Dr. Emily Wilson made the first incision. Her steady hands guided the scalpel with precision that came from years of practice and natural talent. The patient on the table, a 62-year-old grandmother with a failing heart valve, represented exactly why Emily had become a surgeon to give people second chances. BP stable at 110/70, the anesthesiologist announced. Emily nodded without looking up. Thank you, Dr. Patel. Let's proceed with the valve replacement. At 38, Emily was the youngest chief of cardiovascular surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Her reputation for tackling complex heart surgeries had patients requesting her from across the country. Colleagues respected her. Medical journals published her research. By all professional measures, Emily Wilson had succeeded beyond expectations. Yet success had never filled the void inside her, the space where family support should have been. 4 hours later, as Emily washed her hands after the successful surgery, her mind drifted back to where it often went in quiet moments, her childhood home in suburban Boston. The Wilson family's colonial-style house in Newton had appeared picture-perfect from the outside with its manicured lawn and white picket fence. But inside those walls, Emily had been virtually invisible. "Emily, have you seen my cleats?" Tyler's voice had echoed through the house that September afternoon when she was 14. Emily remembered sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by science textbooks, preparing for the state science competition. "Check by the back door," she'd replied without looking up from her notes on molecular biology. Her brother Tyler, 3 years older and the star quarterback of Newton High School, thundered down the stairs. At 17, he'd already received interest letters from college scouts. Their parents, Robert and Sandra Wilson, treated each of those letters like a national treasure, framed and displayed prominently in the living room. "Found them," Tyler shouted, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Dad, we need to go. Coach wants us there early." Their father appeared immediately, car keys already in hand. "Coming, Sandra, we're heading out to Tyler's game," he called out. Their mother rushed in from the garden, pulling off her gloves. "Wait, let me grab my camera. I can't miss Tyler throwing the winning touchdown." Emily looked up from her books. "Mom, I have the state science competition tomorrow. I was wondering if—" "That's nice, honey," her mother interrupted, barely glancing at Emily. "We'll talk about it later. Tyler's game is starting, and you know how traffic gets near the field." "But I've been preparing for months, and the winner gets a scholarship." "Emily," her father said with a hint of impatience, "this could be the game that gets Tyler noticed by the Northeastern Scout. You understand how important that is for his future, right?" Before Emily could respond, her brother ruffled her hair. "Good luck with your science thing, Squirt. Maybe you can tell me about it Sunday." And just like that, they were gone, a whirlwind of energy and excitement that never seemed to include her. The front door slammed, leaving Emily alone with her textbooks and the hollow feeling she'd grown accustomed to. The next day, Emily stood on stage receiving the first-place trophy at the state science competition. She scanned the audience, knowing what she would see empty seats where her parents should have been. Tyler's team had won their game, and the celebration had continued through the night and into the next day. When Emily arrived home with her trophy, her parents were hosting a barbecue for the football team and their families. "Oh, you won. That's wonderful," her mother had said, glancing at the trophy before turning back to arrange hamburger patties on a platter. "Put it in your room, dear. We need the counter space for the food." The memory dissolved as Emily dried her hands in the hospital washroom. Dr. Michael Chen, a pediatric surgeon she'd been dating for 6 months, poked his head in. "Heard your valve replacement was textbook perfect," he said with a warm smile. "Any chance I can convince the brilliant Dr. Wilson to take a dinner break?" Emily smiled back, grateful for his presence in her life. "Give me 15 minutes to check on my patient in recovery and I'm all yours." "I'll wait in the lobby," Michael replied, his gentle eyes crinkling at the corners. "Take your time." As Emily walked toward recovery, her phone buzzed. The name Home appeared on the screen, though it had been years since her parents' house had felt like home. She silenced the call without answering, as she always did. Whatever family drama awaited could wait until after she made sure her patient was stable. In recovery, Emily gently held the hand of her still sedated patient. "You're going to be just fine, Mrs. Abernathy," she whispered. "Your grandchildren will have you around for many more birthdays now." The patient's daughter approached, eyes brimming with tears. "Dr. Wilson, how can we ever thank you? Mom is all we have left since Dad passed. She's our family's heart." Emily squeezed the woman's hand. "Just seeing her recover will be thanks enough. Family is precious. Cherish every moment with her." Words Emily had learned to say, though she'd never experienced their truth in her own life. Harold Wilson's study had always been Emily's sanctuary. While the rest of the family attended Tyler's games or celebrated his smallest accomplishments, Emily found refuge among her grandfather's books on medicine and science. Now, sitting in Michael's car outside her apartment after dinner, Emily found herself telling him about the study, something she rarely shared with anyone. "Granddad's walls were lined with medical journals dating back to the 1960s, she said, gazing out the window at the Baltimore skyline. "He was a professor of medicine at Harvard for 40 years before retiring. The first time he caught me reading one of his medical textbooks, I was 8. Instead of shooing me away, he pulled up a chair beside me." Michael turned in his seat to face her. "What did he say?" Emily smiled at the memory. "He said, 'Finally, someone in this family with a proper curiosity about the world.' Then he showed me an anatomical drawing of the human heart and told me it was the most miraculous machine ever created." "Sounds like he was quite a man," Michael said. "He was the only one who ever really saw me," Emily replied, her voice softening. "Every Saturday when Tyler had his games, Granddad would take me to his old lab at Harvard. The department still gave him access even after retirement. He'd let me look through microscopes, explain experiments. By the time I was 12, I could name every bone in the human body." The memory of one particular afternoon surfaced vividly in her mind, the day that had set her life's course. Emily, 13, had been peering through a microscope at blood cells when her grandfather placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have the focus of a surgeon, Emily." He'd said, his voice carrying the slight tremor of age but none of its frailty of mind. "The way you concentrate the steadiness in your hands. I was watching you adjust that slide, perfect precision." "Dad says medicine is too competitive," Emily had replied without looking up from the microscope. "He says I should consider something more practical like business or teaching." Harold had snorted dismissively. "Your father wouldn't recognize potential if it performed surgery on his myopic vision." He'd tapped the microscope gently. "This is where you belong, Emily. The question is whether you'll listen to those who never truly see you or to the voice inside that already knows your path." That same year, while Tyler bounced between 3 different majors at Boston College, racking up student debt that her parents eagerly covered, Emily had started preparing for pre-med, studying advanced biology and chemistry on her own. By 16, she had mapped out her entire academic journey pre-med at Columbia University, where her grandfather had connections, medical school at Johns Hopkins specialization in cardiovascular surgery. She had researched scholarships, programs, requirements, preparation that most students didn't begin until college. When Emily received her acceptance letter to Columbia with a full academic scholarship, she had rushed home, letter in hand, heart pounding with pride. Her parents were in the kitchen, huddled over financial documents. "Mom, Dad, look." She'd thrust the letter forward. "Full scholarship to Columbia. I won't need any money for tuition, just some help with living expenses in New York." Her father had glanced at the letter, offering a distracted nod. "That's nice, honey. We're dealing with something important right now." "What's going on?" Emily had asked, her excitement deflating. Her mother had sighed heavily. "Tyler's being asked to leave Boston College. His grades, well, it's the 3rd college in 2 years. We're looking at transfer options and figuring out how to cover the lost tuition deposit." Again, Emily hadn't been able to stop herself. "That's the 3rd school. How much has this cost?" "Emily," her father had said sharply, "family supports each other through difficulties. Tyler's just trying to find his path." "And my full scholarship. My acceptance to an Ivy League school, is that not worth acknowledging?" Her mother had finally looked up. "Of course it is, dear. It's wonderful. But you've always been academically gifted. We expected this from you. Tyler needs more support right now." The familiar ache had returned to Emily's chest as she folded the letter and quietly left the room. Later that evening, she'd driven to her grandfather's house, where her achievement had been celebrated properly, with tearful pride, a special dinner, and a gift, her grandfather's own stethoscope from medical school. "You were meant for medicine, Emily," Harold had told her, eyes shining with unabashed pride. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise." You still miss him. Michael observed gently, bringing Emily back to the present. She nodded, blinking away unexpected moisture in her eyes. Every day, especially when I'm in surgery, I sometimes think I can feel him watching over me, making sure my hands stay steady. When did he pass away? 4 years ago, Emily said. Stroke. It was sudden but peaceful, they said. She paused, the familiar guilt returning. I was in the middle of a critical surgery when it happened. I couldn't leave. By the time I made it to Boston, he was gone. Michael reached over and took her hand. He would have understood. You were saving a life, exactly what he inspired you to do. That's what I tell myself, Emily whispered. But sometimes I wonder if anyone will be there when it's my time. If there will be anyone who truly knows me the way he did. Michael squeezed her hand gently. I'd like the chance to know you that way if you'll let me. Emily looked at him, this kind, brilliant man who had somehow slipped past her carefully constructed walls and allowed herself to consider the possibility of being truly seen again. I'd like that too, she finally said. Her phone buzzed again, another call from home. Again she ignored it. They've been calling all week, she explained. Probably Tyler needs money again. His latest business venture must be failing. You never talk much about your brother, Michael observed. Emily's expression hardened slightly. Not much to say. Tyler was the golden child who could do no wrong even when he did everything wrong. Last I heard, he had started some tech app company that my parents mortgaged their house to fund. That must have been difficult growing up in that shadow. It shaped me, Emily said simply. Made me self-reliant. I worked through college and medical school, waitressing, tutoring, any job I could find. Granddad helped sometimes, small amounts when things got really tight, but I wanted to do it myself. Needed to prove I could. And now you're one of the top cardiovascular surgeons in the country, Michael said with admiration. Emily smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in it. Yet somehow in my parents' eyes, I'll never measure up to Tyler, who at 41 still hasn't held a successful job or business for more than a year. Their loss, Michael said firmly. Some people never see the treasure right in front of them. As they said goodnight, Emily felt the familiar pang of emptiness that always followed thoughts of her family. But for the first time in years, there was something else too. A small, warm spark of possibility that perhaps she could create a new kind of family, one built on mutual respect and genuine care. That night, Emily dreamed of her grandfather's study of the smell of old books and the comfort of being truly seen. The Columbia University campus had intimidated Emily at first, its imposing Gothic architecture and well-heeled students a stark contrast to her suburban Boston upbringing. But within weeks, she'd found her stride, excelling in pre-med courses and finding a community of like-minded students who valued intellect and ambition. Working the night shift at a 24-hour diner near campus, Emily had learned to function on minimal sleep, a skill that would serve her well in medical school. Between classes, studying, and work, she called her grandfather weekly, their conversations centering on her studies and his gentle guidance. Calls to her parents' home became increasingly rare and brief. During her sophomore year, Tyler's sporting goods store, funded by her parents' second mortgage, had failed spectacularly after just 8 months. Emily learned about it not from her family, but from her grandfather during one of their calls. They've refinanced the house again, Harold had told her, his voice heavy with disapproval. Your mother's dipping into her retirement fund now. For Tyler, Emily had asked, though she already knew the answer. Who else? Harold had sighed. The store was doomed from the start. Tyler knows nothing about retail or inventory management. Now he's talking about some mobile app idea. Have they asked you for money? A long pause. Yes, I declined. Emily had felt a rush of gratitude toward her grandfather. At least someone in the family understood the concept of consequences. How are your studies? Harold had asked, changing the subject. Top of my class in organic chemistry, Emily had replied, allowing herself a moment of pride. Professor Jenkins asked me to consider joining his research team next semester. That's my girl, Harold had said, and Emily could hear the smile in his voice. You keep focusing on your path. Let the rest of them figure out theirs. Now at 34, Emily stood at the nurses' station at Johns Hopkins, reviewing patient charts. Her residency and fellowship behind her, she had built a reputation for taking on high-risk cases that other surgeons avoided. Her research on minimally invasive valve replacement techniques had been published in leading medical journals. Her career was soaring. Dr. Patricia Alvarez, the hospital's chief of surgery and Emily's mentor, approached with a coffee in each hand. "You've been here for 16 hours straight," Patricia said, handing Emily one of the cups. "The Martinez transplant went well." Emily nodded gratefully, accepting the coffee. "Perfect match. His body's accepting the heart beautifully. And the Richardson twins' congenital defect repairs yesterday. Both stable and recovering ahead of schedule." Patricia studied Emily's face. "You look exhausted, and not just from surgery. What's going on?" Emily hesitated. Patricia was not just her boss, but had become a friend over the years, one of the few people Emily had allowed close. "My brother's latest venture is imploding," Emily finally said. "AppSync, his mobile app development company. My parents invested heavily again. Now he's apparently pivoted to some kind of consulting business." "And they want you to help bail him out," Patricia guessed. Emily shook her head. "They haven't asked directly, yet, but the calls from home have increased. It's only a matter of time." "Will you?" Patricia asked. "No," Emily said firmly. "I stopped enabling that dynamic years ago." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "My grandfather used to say that helping someone who refuses to help themselves isn't kindness. It's complicity in their self-destruction." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Wise man, your grandfather." "He was," Emily agreed, a familiar ache of loss tightening her chest. "The only one who ever—" Her voice trailed off as her phone lit up with yet another call from home. This time it was Tyler's number, not her parents'. Emily stared at the screen until the call went to voicemail. "You could just block their numbers," Patricia suggested. Emily slipped the phone back into her pocket. "They're still family. As dysfunctional as we are, I can't quite bring myself to cut that last thread." Patricia squeezed her shoulder. "Family is complicated, but remember, Emily, you've built an extraordinary life on your own terms. Don't let anyone pull you back into old patterns." "I won't," Emily promised, though a small voice inside whispered that family ties were not so easily severed, no matter how frayed they had become. Later that evening, as Emily prepared dinner in her apartment, her phone rang again. This time she was surprised to see her grandfather's attorney's number. "James," she answered. "Is everything all right?" James Morgan's voice came through, formal as always. "Emily, I apologize for calling after hours. There's a matter concerning your grandfather's estate that requires your attention. Nothing urgent, but I'd appreciate if you could come to Boston in the next few weeks. His estate, it's been 4 years since he passed. I thought everything was settled." "A property issue has arisen," James replied vaguely. "I'd rather discuss it in person." Emily frowned. "I have surgery scheduled for the next 3 weeks. Could we handle this by phone or email?" "I'm afraid not. This is rather sensitive. Family matters are involved." The way he emphasized family sent a chill through Emily. "Is this about Tyler?" she asked directly. A pause. "I really can't say more over the phone. Please come to Boston when you can. My office will accommodate your schedule." After hanging up, Emily stood motionless in her kitchen, a sense of foreboding settling over her. Whatever was happening in Boston, she had a feeling it was about to disrupt the carefully constructed life she had built for herself in Baltimore. 2 days later, Emily was having lunch with Michael in the hospital cafeteria when her phone lit up with her mother's name. "You should answer it," Michael encouraged. "Find out what they want so it stops hanging over you." Emily hesitated, then nodded. "You're right. Better to face it." She accepted the call, putting it on speaker so Michael could hear. "Hello, Mom." "Emily, thank goodness." Sandra Wilson's voice came through, strained with tension. "We've been trying to reach you for days." "I've been in surgery," Emily replied, the familiar defensive edge creeping into her voice. "What's going on?" "It's about Tyler's company," her mother began, and Emily caught Michael's knowing glance across the table. "The new consulting business, ConsultEdge, is taking off, but they need capital for expansion." "Mom," Emily interrupted, "I'm not investing in Tyler's business." "But honey, this is different," Sandra insisted. "He's really found his niche this time. The returns could be substantial. Your father and I have already contributed what we can, but let me guess. It's not enough." A pause. "Tyler needs about $500,000 for office space and hiring staff. We thought with your position at Johns Hopkins you might—" "No," Emily said firmly. "I'm not doing this. I love you, Mom, but I won't enable Tyler's cycle anymore." "This isn't enabling," Sandra countered, her voice rising. "This is supporting family. Why can't you be happy for your brother's success instead of always judging him? Emily closed her eyes, gathering patience. Has it occurred to you that if his business were truly successful, he wouldn't need family handouts? That's unfair, Emily. Starting a business takes capital. Yes, and responsible entrepreneurs secure funding through proper channels, banks, investors who've vetted their business plans. They don't drain their family's resources. You've always been so hard on your brother, Sandra said, her voice cooling. So quick to assume the worst. Emily glanced at Michael, who gave her an encouraging nod. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Has Tyler told you what ConsultEdge actually does, what services they provide, who their clients are? The silence that followed was telling. He advises businesses on growth strategies, Sandra finally said, though her uncertainty was evident. Corporate clients who need expertise. Emily felt a sinking feeling. Have you met any of these clients? Seen the office, the staff? Well, no, but Mom, please be careful. I'm concerned that… Emily stopped herself, realizing that voicing her suspicions would only widen the rift. Just don't invest any more than you already have. Please. Your brother needs our support, Emily. Family supports each other. Yes, they do, Emily agreed quietly. But support should lift people up, not enable them to sink further. After ending the call, Emily looked up to find Michael watching her with concern. You think his business is fraudulent, he stated. Emily nodded slowly. I have no proof. Just a lifetime of watching Tyler's patterns. He starts something, gets family money, lives large for a while, then it implodes. But this time, something feels different. Worse. What will you do? Emily considered for a moment. I need to go to Boston, see James Morgan about whatever this property issue is, and while I'm there, maybe I can get a clearer picture of what Tyler's really up to. Want company? Michael offered. I have some vacation days saved up. Emily felt a rush of warmth at his offer. Thank you, but this is something I need to handle on my own. Family ghosts and all that. Michael reached across the table and took her hand. Just remember, Emily, you're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to believe that might be true. Later that afternoon, Emily was reviewing patient files when a notification appeared on her computer screen, an email from an anonymous account. The subject line read, Consulage Victims Group. Curious, she opened it. Dr. Wilson, you don't know me, but I know your brother Tyler Wilson. I'm reaching out because our investigation indicates you're not involved in his schemes and might not be aware of what he's doing. ConsultEdge is targeting elderly investors, promising exclusive investment opportunities with guaranteed returns. Many of us have lost our retirement savings. A group of us are gathering evidence for legal action. If you have any information that could help, please contact us securely at the link below. If not, please be aware of what your family member is doing in case he tries to involve you. A victim, Emily stared at the screen, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. While she had suspected Tyler's business might be questionable, seeing confirmation that he was actively targeting vulnerable people was sickening. She saved the email but didn't click the link, not yet. First, she needed more information. She opened her browser and began searching for ConsultEdge reviews, Tyler Wilson Consultant, and other variations. The results were sparse, but what she found disturbed her deeply. Several posts on senior citizen forums mentioned ConsultEdge as a company to avoid. One particularly detailed post described how a smooth-talking consultant had convinced the poster's father to invest $75,000 in a guaranteed return opportunity that had disappeared along with the consultant. Emily printed the forum posts and slipped them into her bag. Then she made a decision. She would go to Boston this weekend, meet with James Morgan, and somehow find out exactly what Tyler was doing. If her brother was defrauding elderly people, she couldn't stand by and let it happen regardless of family ties. As she drove home that evening, Emily's mind raced with conflicting emotions. The loyal part of her, the little girl who had once adored her big brother, despite his flaws, wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding that Tyler couldn't possibly have sunk so low. But the rational, observant part of her, the surgeon who had learned to trust her instincts, told her that where there was smoke, there was usually fire. And with Tyler, there had always been smoke. She just hadn't realized until now that innocent people might be getting burned. To be continued. The autumn air carried a chill as Emily's rental car pulled into the driveway of her grandfather's Cape Cod-style home in Brookline just outside Boston. The property looked exactly as she remembered: meticulously maintained gardens, the weathered shingle exterior, the wide front porch where Harold had spent countless evenings with a book and a glass of whiskey. For a moment, Emily could almost see him there, waving to her from his favorite rocking chair. Reality crashed back as she noticed her mother's car already parked in front of the garage. Emily had hoped to have a private moment in her grandfather's home before facing family, but that apparently wasn't to be. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her overnight bag from the passenger seat and made her way to the front door. She still had her key, but out of respect, she knocked first. The door swung open to reveal Sandra Wilson, her blonde hair now streaked with gray, her face showing more lines than when Emily had last seen her 2 years ago. For a moment, mother and daughter simply stared at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "Emily," Sandra finally said, stepping forward for an awkward hug. "You look well." "Thanks, Mom," Emily replied, returning the embrace briefly before stepping back. "How are you and Dad doing?" "Managing," Sandra answered with a tight smile. "Your father's inside. We didn't expect to see you until tomorrow's meeting with James." Emily nodded, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled the same old books, pipe tobacco, though Harold hadn't smoked in years before his death, and the faint scent of lemon polish. "I wanted to spend some time here. I didn't realize you'd be here too." "James called us yesterday about the estate matter," Sandra explained, leading Emily into the living room. "We thought we should come up as well." Robert Wilson sat in Harold's armchair, looking smaller than Emily remembered. At 70, her father's once robust frame had diminished, his shoulders slightly hunched. When he saw Emily, he stood, a smile warming his weathered face. "There's my doctor," he said, opening his arms. Despite everything, Emily felt a tug of affection as she stepped into her father's embrace. "Hi, Dad." "Let me look at you," Robert said, holding her at arm's length. "Working too hard, I bet. Still saving the world one heart at a time." Emily smiled despite herself. "Something like that. How's retirement treating you?" A shadow crossed Robert's face. "It has its challenges, but we're making do." Emily glanced around the living room. "Is Tyler coming too?" Her parents exchanged a look that sent warning bells ringing in Emily's mind. "Tyler and Jessica are meeting us at James's office tomorrow," Sandra said carefully. "They thought it would be best that way." "I see." Emily set her bag down. "Does anyone know what this meeting is about?" James was vague on the phone. Robert sank back into the armchair. "Something about your grandfather's estate. Property issues," he said. "But it's been 4 years," Emily pointed out. "Why now?" "We were hoping you might know," Sandra replied, a hint of accusation in her tone. "You were always closer to him." Emily bit back a retort. Less than 5 minutes in her family's presence, and already the old dynamics were reasserting themselves. "I'm as much in the dark as you are," she said instead. "I guess we'll find out tomorrow." "Will you be staying here tonight?" Sandra asked. Emily nodded. "I thought I would. It feels right being in Granddad's house." "We're at the hotel downtown," Robert said. "Your mother can't sleep here, too many memories." Emily understood. While Harold's house represented comfort and safety to her parents, especially her mother, who had often clashed with her father-in-law, it likely held more complicated associations. "I made up your old room," Sandra said, surprising Emily. "Fresh sheets and towels in the bathroom. We've been coming by weekly to check on the place. Your grandfather's attorney said to keep it maintained until whatever happens next." "Thank you," Emily said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "I appreciate that." A heavy silence fell, the three Wilsons standing awkwardly in the room that had once hosted lively medical debates between Emily and her grandfather. "Well," Sandra finally said, reaching for her purse. "We should get going. Let you settle in. We'll see you at James's office tomorrow at 10. Emily walked her parents to the door, accepting another round of stiff hugs. As she watched their car pull away, she felt the familiar mixture of love, frustration, and lingering hurt that characterized her relationship with them. No matter how accomplished she became in their presence, she always felt like that overlooked 14-year-old girl hungry for recognition that never came. Alone in her grandfather's house, Emily moved from room to room, trailing her fingers over familiar objects. Harold's collection of antique medical instruments, the leather-bound medical texts lining the study walls, the chessboard where he had taught her to think 3 moves ahead. Every corner held memories, each one a reminder of the one person who had truly believed in her. In the study, Emily sank into Harold's desk chair and pulled open the middle drawer where he had always kept family photos. There she found what she was looking for, a picture of herself at her medical school graduation, standing proudly next to her beaming grandfather. Harold had flown to Baltimore for the ceremony despite his doctor's concerns about his heart condition. Emily's parents, caught in the aftermath of another of Tyler's business failures, had sent flowers and their regrets. Emily placed the photo on the desk and opened her laptop. She had research to do before tomorrow's meeting. If Tyler was indeed running some kind of financial scam, she needed evidence beyond an anonymous email and some forum posts. 2 hours of intensive searching yielded troubling results. ConsultEdge had no legitimate business website, just a sparse landing page with vague descriptions of wealth enhancement services and exclusive investment opportunities. The company was registered in Delaware, a common choice for businesses seeking minimal regulatory oversight. Emily found no professional profiles for any employees other than Tyler, and his LinkedIn page was sparse on specifics full of buzzwords like disruptive innovation and wealth maximization strategies. Most concerning were 3 complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau in the past 6 months, all from elderly individuals claiming they had invested substantial sums with ConsultEdge and had been unable to contact anyone at the company afterward or obtain documentation of their investments. Emily printed the complaints and added them to her growing file. Then, following a hunch, she searched for properties owned by Tyler or his wife Jessica. Nothing came up under their names in Massachusetts, but a luxury home in Newton was registered to a T&J Holdings LLC, an entity created just 3 years ago. "Living beyond your means again, Tyler," Emily murmured, noting the estimated value of the property, $1.8 million, far more than a struggling business owner should be able to afford. As she continued digging, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times. Emily realized she'd been researching for hours without eating. She made her way to the kitchen, finding it exactly as she remembered. Harold had been an excellent cook, and the room reflected his passion with high-end appliances and well-organized spaces. Opening the refrigerator, Emily was surprised to find it stocked with fresh food, her mother's doing, presumably. A note on the counter confirmed it. "Made some of your favorites. There's lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry. Mom." The gesture touched Emily more than she expected. Perhaps there was still a foundation of love beneath the years of hurt and misunderstanding. After warming a plate of lasagna, Emily carried it back to the study, unable to tear herself away from her investigation. As she ate, she searched for Jessica Wilson's social media accounts. Tyler's wife had always been image-conscious, and Emily suspected she might find evidence of their lifestyle there. Jessica's Instagram account was public and active, a showcase of luxury vacations, designer purchases, and elaborate home renovations. In a post from just 2 weeks ago, Jessica posed beside a new Mercedes SUV with the caption, "New wheels #blessed, #hard work pays off, #entrepreneur life." Emily scrolled through months of similar posts, a Hamptons vacation designer shopping sprees, expensive restaurant meals. Each image built a picture of extravagant spending that seemed completely disconnected from the reality of a startup consulting business. More disturbing were Jessica's occasional business spouse posts, including one showing Tyler speaking to a group of elderly people with the caption, "So proud of my husband sharing investment wisdom with these sweet seniors, #wealth building, #retirement planning." Emily saved the image, her concern deepening. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was troubling. But she needed more concrete evidence before making accusations against her own brother. Exhaustion finally overtook her around midnight. Emily closed her laptop and made her way upstairs to the bedroom that had once been hers during summer visits. As Sandra had promised, the room was freshly prepared with clean towels folded on the bed and a small vase of autumn flowers on the nightstand. Another unexpected motherly touch. As Emily drifted off to sleep in her grandfather's house, surrounded by memories of the one person who had always believed in her, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's meeting would change everything. Whatever James Morgan needed to discuss about Harold's estate, Emily sensed it was somehow connected to Tyler's activities and the growing distance between her and her family. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of Michael. She wished he were here with her facing this together. For the first time in her adult life, Emily realized she didn't want to handle everything alone anymore. James Morgan's law office occupied the top floor of a stately brownstone in Boston's Back Bay. Emily arrived 15 minutes early, hoping to speak with James privately before the family meeting, but the receptionist informed her that Mr. Morgan was finishing another appointment and would see the entire Wilson family together at 10. Emily took a seat in the waiting area, idly flipping through a legal magazine while keeping an eye on the entrance. At 5 minutes to 10, her parents arrived, both dressed formally, as if attending a court hearing. Sandra gave Emily a tight smile while Robert nodded solemnly. "Any idea what this is about?" Emily asked quietly. Robert shook his head. "James wouldn't say over the phone, just that it concerns your grandfather's estate and requires the family's presence." At precisely 10 o'clock, the receptionist's phone buzzed. "Mr. Morgan will see you now," she announced, gesturing toward a heavy oak door. "What about Tyler?" Sandra asked, glancing toward the entrance. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened to reveal Tyler and Jessica Wilson. Emily hadn't seen her brother in nearly 3 years, and the changes were striking. Always handsome in a conventional way, Tyler now looked the part of a successful businessman in a tailored suit and designer glasses. His wife Jessica, statuesque and impeccably styled, clutched a Hermes handbag that Emily knew cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Tyler hesitated upon seeing Emily's uncertainty flashing across his face before he recovered with a practiced smile. "Emily," he said, stepping forward to kiss her cheek. "It's been too long." Emily accepted the greeting stiffly. "Hello, Tyler, Jessica." Jessica offered a cool smile. "Dr. Wilson, still saving lives in Baltimore." "That's the goal," Emily replied, noting the slight emphasis Jessica had placed on her title, a passive-aggressive acknowledgement of her success, or a genuine respect Emily couldn't tell. The receptionist cleared her throat. "Mr. Morgan is waiting." The Wilson family filed into a spacious conference room where James Morgan stood at the head of a polished mahogany table. At 72, James was trim and distinguished with silver hair and alert blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Harold's attorney for decades and had handled the initial estate matters after his death. "Thank you all for coming," James said, gesturing toward the chairs. "Please sit down." Emily took a seat opposite her brother while their parents sat at the end of the table. Jessica positioned herself beside Tyler, her manicured hand resting protectively on his arm. "I apologize for the mystery." James began opening a leather portfolio. "But given the sensitive nature of what I'm about to share, I felt it best to speak with everyone together." He removed several documents from the portfolio and placed them on the table. "As you know, Harold Wilson's will was executed 4 years ago following his passing. The bulk of his estate liquid assets, totaling approximately $800,000, was distributed according to his instructions, $100,000 each to Robert and Sandra, and the remainder to Emily." Tyler shifted in his seat, a muscle twitching in his jaw. This wasn't news. The initial distribution had caused significant tension in the family, with Tyler and her parents feeling that Emily had been unfairly favored. "What you don't know," James continued, "is that Harold left additional instructions to be revealed only after certain conditions were met. Those conditions have now been satisfied." Emily leaned forward. "What conditions?" James looked directly at her. "Harold requested that I conduct a thorough investigation into certain financial matters before revealing the second part of his estate plan. That investigation has now concluded." "Investigation into what?" Tyler asked sharply. Instead of answering, James slid a document across the table. Harold Wilson's complete estate included significantly more assets than were initially disclosed. In addition to the distributed funds, he owned this property in Brookline, valued at approximately $1.2 million, and substantial land holdings in Boston and Cape Cod, with a combined value of approximately $3.1 million. Sandra gasped. "That's not possible. Harold wasn't wealthy." "Your father-in-law was an extremely private man," James replied. "He lived modestly but invested wisely throughout his career. The properties were held in a trust that I've been managing according to his instructions." "And you're only telling us this now?" Robert asked, his voice rising. 4 years after his death. "As I said, Harold left explicit instructions." James adjusted his glasses. "I was to maintain the properties in trust until completing a confidential investigation, at which point I would reveal the final disposition of these assets." Tyler leaned forward, his expression suddenly keen. "And what is that disposition?" James removed a sealed envelope from his portfolio. "Harold recorded a video message to be played at this meeting. I believe it will answer your questions." He stood and moved to a screen on the wall, inserting a flash drive into the connected computer. After a few keystrokes, Harold Wilson's face appeared on the screen. Emily's breath caught. Seeing her grandfather again vibrant and clear-eyed, recorded shortly before his death, sent a wave of emotion through her. He sat in his study, the familiar bookshelves behind him, wearing the cardigan Emily had given him for his last birthday. "If you're watching this," Harold began, his voice strong despite his age, "then James has completed the investigation I requested, and you're all gathered to hear my final wishes." He leaned closer to the camera, his gaze seeming to find each family member in turn. "Robert, Sandra, my son and daughter-in-law. I know we've had our differences over the years, particularly regarding how you've raised your children. I've never approved of the favoritism you've shown Tyler at Emily's expense, nor the way you've repeatedly bailed him out of his self-created problems while ignoring Emily's remarkable achievements." Sandra made a small sound of protest, but Robert placed a quieting hand on her arm. "Tyler," Harold continued, his expression hardening slightly, "I've watched with disappointment as you've squandered opportunity after opportunity. You've been given every advantage, financial support, connections, second chances, yet you've consistently chosen the path of least resistance, often at others' expense." Tyler's face flushed, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. "And Emily?" Harold's expression softened, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "My brilliant, determined granddaughter. You've forged your own path against considerable odds, including the painful lack of support from your own family. You've become exactly the person I always knew you could be, compassionate, skilled, and resilient. I couldn't be prouder." Emily felt tears burning behind her eyes, but forced them back. She was acutely aware of her family's gazes on her. "Now to the matter at hand," Harold continued. "The properties I've kept in trust represent the bulk of my estate. James has been investigating certain financial matters at my request, specifically concerning Tyler's business activities and the family's financial entanglements." Tyler shifted uncomfortably, exchanging a glance with Jessica. "Based on the results of that investigation," Harold said, "I've made my decision regarding these properties. The Brookline house and all its contents I leave to Emily along with the Cape Cod property. These are places where she found safety and encouragement, and they rightfully belong to her." Emily heard her mother's sharp intake of breath, but kept her eyes fixed on her grandfather's image. "As for the Boston land holdings," Harold continued, "I've learned through James's investigation that Tyler has accumulated substantial debts, approximately $320,000 as of my recording this message, and has taken a secondary mortgage on Robert and Sandra's home without their knowledge to fund his latest venture." "That's not true," Tyler exclaimed, half rising from his chair. James paused the video. "I have the documentation, Tyler," he said quietly, sliding another folder across the table. "Bank records, loan agreements, liens against your parents' property, all signed by you using a power of attorney your father granted you 3 years ago." Robert's face had gone pale. "Power of attorney I never—" "The document appears legitimate," James interrupted gently, "though the circumstances under which it was obtained might be questionable." Tyler sank back into his chair, his confident facade crumbling. "Dad, I can explain. It was temporary, just to secure some bridge financing. I was going to pay it back before anyone found out." Emily finished the pieces, suddenly fitting together. Tyler hadn't just been scamming strangers. He'd been stealing from their parents, too. James unpaused the video. "Given these circumstances," Harold continued, "and Tyler's pattern of financial irresponsibility, I'm leaving the Boston property, a parcel in Newton, to Emily as well, with specific instructions." Harold leaned forward, his expression grave. "Emily, the Newton property currently contains a house where Tyler and his wife are living, a house built on land that as of this recording belongs to me, though Tyler has been acting as if it's his. James will explain the legal details, but essentially Tyler has been building on land he doesn't own, likely using fraudulently obtained funds." The room fell silent. Emily looked at Tyler, whose face had drained of color. Jessica sat frozen beside him, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his arm. "I'm giving you this property, Emily," Harold said, "because I trust you to handle it responsibly. Tyler has lived his entire life without consequences. Perhaps it's time that changed." Harold's expression softened again. "I love all of you, even as I've been disappointed by some of you. This isn't about punishment, but about truth and responsibility. Robert, Sandra, I'm leaving you each an additional $100,000. Use it wisely, perhaps, to clear the debts Tyler has accumulated in your name." He looked directly into the camera, seeming to meet Emily's eyes across time. "Emily, you've survived being the invisible child. Now it's time for you to step fully into the light. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it." With that, the screen went black. The conference room remained silent for several long moments. Emily felt oddly calm, as if she'd been preparing for this revelation without knowing it. Tyler was the first to speak, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "This is bullshit. Complete bullshit. He was a senile old man with a grudge against me. I'll contest this." James shook his head. "The will is ironclad, Tyler." Harold had a complete neuropsychological evaluation before recording this message specifically to prevent such challenges, and I've spent the past 4 years gathering evidence that confirms everything he alleged. "What evidence?" Tyler demanded. James opened another folder. "Financial records showing transfers from your parents' equity line to your personal accounts. Documentation of the Newton property purchase through a shell company that traces back to you using funds of questionable origin. Records of multiple failed businesses and unpaid debts. And most recently, complaints filed against ConsultEdge for what appears to be a classic investment scam targeting senior citizens." Emily watched as her brother's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally a calculating stillness. Tyler had always been charming and manipulative. She could almost see him formulating his next move. "Mom, Dad," Tyler said, turning to their parents. "You can't believe this. Granddad always had it in for me. He never understood the realities of business, the risks involved, the temporary setbacks. I was protecting you by not burdening you with every detail." Sandra looked torn, her loyalty to her son warring with the evidence before her. Robert, however, appeared shattered, the color still absent from his face. "The second mortgage," he said quietly. "That's why the bank called last month. They weren't making a mistake about missed payments." "Dad, I was going to fix it," Tyler insisted. "ConsultEdge is about to turn the corner. We have major investors coming in. Stop!" Emily's voice cut through the room, quiet but firm. "Just stop, Tyler. It's over." She turned to James. "What happens now?" James adjusted his glasses. "Legally, you now own the Brookline house, the Cape Cod property, and the land in Newton on which Tyler's house stands. The additional funds will be transferred to your parents' accounts by the end of the week." He slid a final document across the table. "This requires your signature to execute the transfers." Emily stared at the document, suddenly understanding the full weight of her grandfather's bequest. He had given her not just property and money, but power, the power to hold Tyler accountable after a lifetime of evasion. "What about Tyler's house?" she asked. "The physical structure on the Newton land." "Technically, the structure belongs to whoever built it," James explained. "But without ownership of the land beneath, Tyler's position is legally precarious. You could, if you wished, require him to vacate the property or pay rent to remain." Jessica made a sound of distress, whispering urgently in Tyler's ear. Emily caught fragments. "Can't lose the house. What about the Hamptons plan? My parents will die." Tyler shook off his wife's hand, his expression hardening as he stared at Emily. "So that's it. You're going to take everything. Throw your own brother out on the street to satisfy some childhood grudge." Emily met his gaze steadily. "I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, Tyler. But unlike you, I'll take some time to consider the consequences of my actions." She signed the document and stood gathering her things. "James, thank you for handling this with such care. I know it couldn't have been easy." "Your grandfather trusted you," James replied simply. "I can see why." Emily turned to her parents, who sat shell-shocked at the end of the table. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry you had to learn about Tyler's deception this way. I'll be at Granddad's house, my house now, I suppose, for the next 2 days, if you want to talk." Without another glance at Tyler or Jessica, Emily walked out of the conference room, her mind already racing with the implications of what had just happened. As the door closed behind her, she heard Tyler's voice rise in protest, followed by James's calm but firm responses. Outside on the sidewalk, Emily took her first full breath since entering the attorney's office. The autumn sun warmed her face as she tilted it skyward, thinking of her grandfather's final gift to her. It wasn't just the properties or their considerable value. It was the vindication, the acknowledgement that she had been right all along about Tyler, about the family dynamics that had shaped and sometimes warped them all. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "Michael." "How did it go?" he asked when she answered. Emily laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me," he replied, his voice a steadying presence. As Emily walked through Boston's historic streets, she recounted the meeting and her grandfather's posthumous revelations. Michael listened without interruption, only occasionally making sounds of surprise or support. "So now you own 3 properties, including the land under Tyler's house," Michael summarized when she finished. "What are you going to do?" Emily paused at a crosswalk, watching the pedestrian signal change. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to force Tyler to face consequences for once in his life, but evicting him and Jessica seems extreme." "Whatever you decide," Michael said, "make sure it's what you want, not what Tyler or your parents expect. This is your chance to break old patterns." "I know," Emily replied, realizing the truth in his words. "It's just complicated." "Family always is," Michael said gently. "Do you want me to come up there? I could be in Boston by tonight." Emily was tempted, but shook her head, though he couldn't see it. "No, but thank you. I need to handle this myself. But knowing you're there, it helps." After ending the call, Emily changed direction, heading toward the public garden. She needed space to think, to process the morning's revelations, and decide her next steps. As she walked, her phone buzzed with text messages from her mother asking where she was if they could talk. Emily silenced the phone, needing distance from the emotional maelstrom of her family. Sitting on a bench beside the garden's pond, Emily closed her eyes, imagining what her grandfather would advise now. Harold had always valued fairness, responsibility, and growth. He wouldn't want her to use this inheritance as a weapon, but as a tool for positive change. The real question was whether Tyler was capable of change, or if he was too set in patterns of deception and entitlement. And her parents, could they finally see the truth about their son? Or would they continue enabling his behavior at their own expense? As the afternoon light softened around her, Emily reached a decision. She wouldn't act out of anger or resentment, nor from a desire for revenge. She would act from a place of clarity and purpose, the way her grandfather had taught her, to approach difficult surgeries, assess the situation, honestly identify the core problem, and take decisive action with healing as the goal. With new resolve, Emily stood and began walking back toward Brookline. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms, no longer the invisible girl, but a woman fully in command of her own story. When Emily returned to her grandfather's house, her house now, she found her parents waiting on the front porch. Sandra sat stiffly on the porch swing while Robert paced the weathered boards, his face lined with worry. "Emily," Sandra said, rising as Emily approached, "we've been trying to reach you." "I needed some time to think," Emily replied, unlocking the front door. "Come in, we should talk." In the living room, an uncomfortable silence settled as Emily and her parents took seats. Robert looked aged beyond his years, the revelations about Tyler's deception having taken a visible toll. "Is it true?" Sandra finally asked. "Everything your grandfather and James said about Tyler. The second mortgage, the debts." Emily met her mother's gaze directly. "I believe so, yes. I've been doing some research of my own. ConsultEdge appears to be targeting elderly investors with promises of high returns. There are multiple complaints filed with regulatory agencies." Robert passed a hand over his face. "How did we not see this? How did it go so far?" "Because you didn't want to see it," Emily said gently. "You've always protected Tyler, made excuses for him. It's been the pattern since we were children." "That's not fair," Sandra protested weakly. "We love both our children equally." Emily shook her head. "No, Mom, you don't. You never have. Tyler has always been the focus of your attention, your resources, your concern, even when he didn't deserve it. Even when I did." "Emily," Robert began. "Let me finish," Emily interrupted, years of suppressed feelings finally finding voice. "Do you know what it was like growing up as your daughter? To work so hard, achieve so much, only to be treated as an afterthought? To watch Tyler fail repeatedly and still receive your unconditional support, while my accomplishments were barely acknowledged?" Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "We were proud of you. We've always been proud. But you never showed it," Emily said. "Not when it mattered. Not when I was a child desperate for your approval, or a teenager winning scholarships, or a medical student graduating at the top of my class. Do you know who was there when I received my white coat, when I graduated from medical school, when I completed my residency? Granddad. Only Granddad." Robert looked stricken. "We wanted to be there. There were circumstances, Tyler's circumstances," Emily finished for him. "Always Tyler's latest crisis taking precedence over my life milestones." The three sat in silence, the weight of decades of family dysfunction hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice unsteady. "You're right. We failed you, Emily. We didn't see what was happening with you or with Tyler. We thought we were helping him, but maybe we were just enabling him." Sandra dabbed at her eyes. "What will you do about the Newton property, about Tyler's house?" Emily had been considering this question all afternoon. "I haven't decided yet, but I won't make any sudden moves. Tyler and Jessica can stay there for now, but there will be conditions." "What sort of conditions?" Robert asked. "I'm still working that out," Emily replied. "But they'll involve accountability and responsibility concepts Tyler has managed to avoid his entire life." Her parents nodded, seeming to accept her position. As they prepared to leave, Sandra paused at the door. "Emily, I know it doesn't change the past, but we are proud of you. So proud. What you've accomplished, the lives you've saved, it's extraordinary. We just didn't know how to show it, especially when Tyler needed so much from us." Emily felt a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude for the acknowledgement, sadness for what could have been caution about whether anything would truly change. "Thank you for saying that," she said simply. "It means something to hear it even now." After her parents left, Emily called Michael, finding comfort in sharing her thoughts and feelings with someone who truly listened. Later, she spent the evening in her grandfather's study, formulating a plan for handling the Tyler situation, one that would offer consequences, but also opportunity for genuine change. The following morning, Emily received a text from Tyler. "We need to talk. Dinner at our place tonight. Just family to work things out." Emily hesitated, suspecting Tyler's motives weren't as conciliatory as the message suggested. Still, they did need to discuss the property situation. She replied 7 p.m., but Jessica should be there too. The response came quickly. "Of course. Jessica's making her famous lasagna. Just the four of us, Mom and Dad have plans." That evening, Emily drove to the Newton address, seeing Tyler and Jessica's home with new eyes. The sprawling contemporary house, with its manicured landscaping and circular driveway, radiated prosperity built on deception she now knew. Tyler answered the door with a welcoming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Emily, come in. Thanks for coming." The interior was as impressive as the exterior, open-concept design, with high ceilings, designer furniture, and expensive art. Jessica emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron over her silk blouse and tailored pants. "Emily," she said, her tone carefully pleasant. "Dinner's almost ready. Would you like a glass of wine?" "Just water, thanks," Emily replied, remaining alert. "I'm driving back to Boston tonight." Tyler led her to a sitting area overlooking the backyard with its swimming pool and outdoor kitchen. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, gesturing to the property. "We designed everything ourselves. Jessica has quite an eye for detail." Emily nodded noncommittally. "It's impressive." "We've worked hard for this," Tyler continued, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. "Built it from nothing." Emily couldn't let that pass. "Built it on land you don't own with money that isn't yours." Tyler's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his composed facade. "That's what I wanted to discuss. This situation, it's all a misunderstanding. Granddad was confused toward the end, you know that. And James Morgan, well, he's always favored you." "The documentation seems quite clear," Emily replied. "The land belongs to me now, and you've been committing fraud, Tyler, not just against strangers, but against our own parents." Tyler waved a dismissive hand. "Business involves risk. Sometimes you have to make aggressive moves. The secondary mortgage was temporary, a bridge until our investors came through. And those investors, the elderly people you've been targeting." A flicker of something guilt alarm crossed Tyler's face before disappearing. "Our clients are sophisticated individuals seeking better returns than traditional investments offer. Everything is above board." Emily didn't push further. She had what she needed. Tyler wasn't remorseful or even acknowledging wrongdoing. He was still spinning, still justifying, still lying. Jessica called them to dinner, serving an elaborate meal that Emily suspected was designed to impress. Throughout the first course, Tyler and Jessica maintained superficial conversation about mutual acquaintances and Boston's social scene, studiously avoiding the elephant in the room. As Jessica served the main course, her famous lasagna, Tyler finally broached the subject. "So about the property situation," he began casually. "I've been thinking of a solution that works for everyone. ConsultEdge is positioned for major growth. We're about to close with several significant investors, which will generate substantial returns. Emily took a sip of water, waiting for the pitch she knew was coming. What I propose, Tyler continued, is that you invest in ConsultEdge, say $500,000. In return, you'll receive a 20% stake in the company, which will easily double or triple within a year. Meanwhile, you transfer the Newton land back to me as a gesture of family solidarity. Emily set down her glass, studying her brother. He actually believed this would work, that she would hand over $500,000 and surrender her legal claim to valuable property, all on the promise of returns from a company she knew to be fraudulent. No, she said simply. Tyler blinked, momentarily thrown by her direct refusal. You haven't heard the full proposal. I don't need to, Emily interrupted. I've seen the complaints against ConsultEdge. I know you're running an investment scam. I won't be part of it, and I certainly won't fund it. Jessica's face flushed with anger. That's ridiculous. ConsultEdge is a legitimate business. Those complaints are from people who don't understand the investment cycle. Then show me the company's financials, Emily challenged. The client lists the investment portfolio, the returns. Tyler and Jessica exchanged glances. Those are confidential business documents, Tyler said smoothly. But I can assure you everything is proceeding according to plan. The $500,000 would simply accelerate our growth phase. Emily shook her head, pushing away her barely touched lasagna. I'm not investing in ConsultEdge. And regarding this property as the legal owner of the land, I'll be requiring monthly payments if you wish to continue living here. Payments? Jessica echoed incredulously. You want us to pay rent on our own home? The house is yours, Emily clarified. The land beneath it is mine. That's how property law works. You can either pay fair market rent for the land use or sell the house to someone who will. Tyler's composure finally cracked. This is how you treat family, taking advantage of a legal technicality to extort money from your own brother. I'm not the one who took advantage of family, Emily replied evenly. You've been stealing from our parents for years, building this lifestyle on lies and fraud. I'm offering you a legitimate option to maintain your home while taking responsibility for your actions. Tyler stood abruptly, his face contorted with rage. You've always been jealous of me, always resented the attention I got. Well, maybe if you hadn't been such a cold, boring little overachiever, Mom and Dad would have shown more interest. Emily remained seated, refusing to be baited. My childhood issues aren't relevant to your adult crimes, Tyler. Crimes? Jessica interjected, her voice rising. How dare you come into our home and accuse us? Your home on my land, Emily reminded her calmly. Something in Tyler snapped. With a roar of fury, he grabbed his bowl of soup and hurled the contents directly at Emily's face. Hot liquid splashed across her hair, face, and blouse, the sudden shock momentarily stunning her. You've got 10 minutes to get out of our house, Tyler shouted, his face purple with rage. 10 minutes before I throw you out myself. Emily sat frozen for a moment, soup dripping from her hair onto the designer tablecloth. Then, with deliberate calm, she reached for her napkin and began dabbing at her face. Actually, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her, I think I'll leave now. But before I go, she reached into her purse and removed a thick envelope, placing it on the table between them. Soup had splattered across the front, but the contents remained dry. What's that? Jessica asked, eyeing the envelope suspiciously. Documentation, Emily replied, standing up. Complete records of ConsultEdge's activities, including evidence of fraud, misappropriation of investor funds, and false advertising. I've compiled statements from clients who invested with you and received nothing in return. Elderly clients, Tyler. People who trusted you with their retirement savings. Tyler's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Am I? Emily held his gaze. I also have records of the secondary mortgage you took out in our parents' names, using a power of attorney that Dad says he never knowingly granted. That's fraud and elder abuse, Tyler. Criminal offenses. Jessica sank into her chair, her perfect composure crumbling. Tyler, what is she talking about? You said those investment complaints were handled. Emily continued, her calm voice a stark contrast to the chaos she had unleashed. Here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. Option 1, I take this documentation to the authorities tomorrow, and you face criminal charges for fraud, financial elder abuse, and whatever else the prosecutors can build a case for. You'll likely face significant jail time, and everything you own will be seized. Tyler swallowed hard. And option 2, Emily said, is that you begin making restitution. You pay back every investor you've defrauded, starting with the most vulnerable. You pay rent for the land your house stands on $3,000 per month, which is below market rate, but enough to be meaningful. And you find legitimate employment, Tyler. Something honest for once in your life. This is blackmail. Tyler sputtered, but the fight had gone out of him. No, Emily corrected. This is your last chance to choose a better path. Granddad wanted you to face consequences, but he also believed in redemption. So do I. She turned to leave soup still dripping from her hair. At the doorway, she paused and delivered her final blow. By the way, there's something else you should know. I've already filed reports with the SEC and the State Attorney General's office about ConsultEdge. I've requested they delay action pending family resolution, but if I don't contact them within 72 hours, the investigation proceeds automatically. The shock on Tyler and Jessica's faces confirmed what Emily had suspected. They had been planning to flee once they had her money. The partially packed boxes she'd glimpsed in the hallway, the travel documents visible on Tyler's desk, they had been preparing to disappear. 3 days, Tyler, Emily said quietly, to decide what kind of person you really want to be. With that, she walked out into the cool evening air, leaving her brother and sister-in-law in stunned silence behind her. Despite the soup in her hair and the stains on her clothing, Emily felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time, she had confronted the family dynamics that had shaped her life, not from a place of victimhood, but from a position of power and clarity. As she drove back to Boston, Emily realized that her grandfather's true legacy wasn't the properties or money he'd left her. It was the example he'd set of integrity, responsibility, and the courage to stand for what was right, even when it was difficult. Harold Wilson had given her the strength to break free from patterns of invisibility and find her own voice. Whether Tyler would find redemption remained to be seen, but Emily knew that whatever happened next, she would face it not as the forgotten child, but as the woman she had become, strong, compassionate, and finally visible. To be continued. Emily spent a restless night at her grandfather's house after the explosive dinner with Tyler and Jessica. Despite the lingering smell of chicken soup in her hair, she'd showered twice. It was the aftershocks of confrontation that kept her awake. Had she gone too far? Not far enough. Would Tyler actually change, or was she merely postponing an inevitable crash? By morning, Emily had received no messages from her brother or sister-in-law, only concerned texts from her parents who had somehow already heard about the incident at Tyler's house. Emily responded briefly, assuring them she was fine and would explain everything later. She had 2 more days in Boston before she needed to return to Baltimore and her waiting patients. After a quiet breakfast in her grandfather's kitchen, now her kitchen, Emily's phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "How are you holding up?" he asked when she answered. "Honestly, I'm not sure," Emily admitted, cradling the phone as she gazed out at the autumn garden. "I feel like I've opened Pandora's box." "Any regrets?" Emily considered the question. "No," she finally said. "It needed to happen, but I'm worried about what comes next." Tyler seemed genuinely shocked when I confronted him with evidence of his fraud. I think he's been living in a fantasy world where his actions don't have consequences. People like that usually do, Michael observed, until reality catches up with them. The thing is, Emily continued, part of me still remembers the brother who taught me to ride a bike, who defended me from bullies in elementary school. Before our parents' favoritism really took hold, there were good times. That's the hardest part of family dysfunction, Michael said softly. The good memories make it impossible to simply write someone off. Exactly, Emily agreed. I don't want to destroy Tyler. I just want him to stop hurting people, including himself. They spoke for a few more minutes before Emily reluctantly mentioned that she needed to go. She had an appointment with James Morgan to sign the final paperwork for her inheritance. Call me after, Michael said. And Emily, whatever happens with Tyler, you've done the right thing. Some people need to hit bottom before they can start climbing back up. Emily pondered his words as she drove into Boston. Was that what she had done, forced Tyler to hit bottom? Or had she thrown him a lifeline just as he was about to drown in consequences of his own making? She wasn't sure, and that uncertainty troubled her. At James Morgan's office, the attorney greeted her with respectful warmth. You're looking well despite yesterday's excitement, he said, gesturing her to a seat. Your parents called me last night quite concerned. I'm sure they were, Emily replied. They've spent decades worrying about Tyler. It's a hard habit to break. James nodded understanding. I wanted to update you on a few matters before we finalize the property transfers. First, the additional funds have been deposited in your parents' accounts as stipulated in Harold's will. Second, I've initiated a quiet title action for the Newton property to formally establish your ownership of the land beneath Tyler's house. How long will that process take? Emily asked. Given the clear documentation, we have no more than a few weeks, James replied. Until then, while you legally own the land, there might be some gray areas regarding your rights to impose conditions on its use. Emily nodded. I understand. To be honest, I'm more concerned about Tyler's potential legal troubles than asserting my property rights immediately. James studied her over his glasses. Harold mentioned you might feel that way. That's why he included this in his instructions to me. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. He asked that I give you this letter privately after you'd confronted Tyler with the truth. Emily stared at the envelope, recognizing her grandfather's distinctive handwriting. He anticipated all of this. James smiled slightly. Your grandfather was remarkably perceptive. He saw patterns and connections that others missed. It's what made him an excellent physician and researcher. With slightly trembling fingers, Emily opened the envelope and unfolded the letter within. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then you've learned the full truth about Tyler's activities and the difficult position your parents have placed themselves in through their blind devotion to him. I imagine you're feeling conflicted, torn between righteous anger and familial love, between the desire for justice and the hope for redemption. This conflict speaks to who you are. Emily, someone with both strength and compassion, clarity and empathy. These qualities have made you an excellent surgeon, and they will serve you well in navigating this family crisis. When I made the decision to leave you my properties, I knew I was placing a burden on your shoulders along with a gift, the burden of choice. You now have power over Tyler's future in ways he never had over yours. What you do with that power will reveal much about your character, though I have no doubts about what I will find there. I want you to know that whatever you decide, whether to hold Tyler fully accountable for his actions or to offer him a path to redemption, I would support your choice. You have always shown wisdom beyond your years, even when those who should have nurtured that wisdom failed to recognize it. There is one thing I ask you to consider, however. True healing for Tyler, for your parents and especially for you, cannot come without accountability. Forgiveness without change is merely permission to continue harmful patterns. If there is to be reconciliation in your family, it must be built on honesty and responsibility, not on the quicksand of denial that has characterized your family dynamics for so long. You were the invisible child Emily overlooked and undervalued. But you have become a remarkable woman of substance and integrity. Trust that woman's judgment. Trust your heart guided by your formidable mind. Whatever path you choose, know that I am immeasurably proud of you. You have exceeded every hope I had for you, and I leave this world confident that my legacy rests in the most capable hands I could have chosen. With eternal love and pride, your grandfather Harold 10. Emily carefully refolded the letter, tears blurring her vision. Even beyond the grave, her grandfather had found a way to offer exactly the guidance she needed. He knew me so well, she said quietly, slipping the letter into her purse. James nodded. Better than anyone, I think. Harold spoke of you often in our discussions about his estate planning. He wanted to ensure that his legacy would not only benefit you materially, but would also provide an opportunity for healing if possible. If possible, Emily repeated. That's the question, isn't it? Whether some wounds can truly heal. I've practiced law for over 40 years, James said, leaning back in his chair. I've seen families torn apart by inheritance disputes and others brought together by crisis. The difference usually lies not in the circumstances, but in the people involved, their capacity for growth and change. And their willingness to face uncomfortable truths, Emily added. Precisely. James pushed a folder toward her. These are the final documents transferring the properties into your name. Once you sign, everything will be legally yours. What you do with that ownership is entirely your decision. Emily took the pen he offered, hesitating only briefly before signing where indicated. As she did, she felt a weight settling onto her shoulders. Not an unpleasant burden, but the mantle of responsibility her grandfather had entrusted to her. What would you do? She asked James as she handed back the signed documents. If you were in my position. The attorney considered her question carefully. I'm not a family counselor, Emily, but I've observed your family dynamics for many years. Your brother has never faced meaningful consequences for his actions. Your parents have shielded him at great personal cost. The pattern won't break unless something forces it to break. You're saying I shouldn't back down. I'm saying that compassion doesn't always look like forgiveness without conditions, James clarified. Sometimes the most compassionate action is holding someone accountable, especially when their behavior is harming others. Emily nodded, her resolve strengthening. Thank you, James, for everything you've done for my grandfather and for me. It has been my honor, the attorney replied, standing to escort her to the door. Harold was one of my oldest friends. Seeing his wishes fulfilled, especially regarding you, brings me great satisfaction. As Emily left the office, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Tyler says you're threatening him with criminal charges. Please call us. Emily sighed, slipping the phone back into her pocket without responding. She needed time to think, to formulate a plan that balanced accountability with opportunity for genuine change. More than anything, she needed to break free of the old family dynamic, where Tyler's crises always took center stage, demanding immediate attention and resolution. Instead of calling her parents, Emily drove to the harbor, finding a quiet bench overlooking the water. The October sunlight glinted off the waves as sailboats and water taxis crisscrossed the harbor. She watched them, thinking about navigation, how even small course corrections maintained consistently could dramatically change a vessel's destination over time. That evening, Emily was preparing dinner in her grandfather's kitchen when the doorbell rang. She opened the door to find her parents on the porch, their expressions a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to talk," Robert said without preamble. "About Tyler." Emily stepped back, gesturing them inside. "I'm making pasta. Have you eaten?" The question seemed to surprise them, domestic normality in the midst of family crisis. "We're not hungry," Sandra replied, following Emily to the kitchen. "Emily, what's going on? Tyler says you're threatening to have him arrested." Emily continued stirring the pasta sauce deliberately, keeping her movements calm and measured. "I presented Tyler with evidence of his fraudulent activities and gave him a choice-make restitution to the people he's harmed or face legal consequences." "What fraudulent activities?" Robert asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Tyler says it's all a misunderstanding." "Of course he does," Emily said, turning to face her parents. "Tyler has been running an investment scam through Consult Edge, targeting elderly people with promises of high returns that never materialize. I have documented statements from victims' bank records showing where their money actually went into Tyler and Jessica's lifestyle, not legitimate investments." Sandra sank onto a kitchen stool. "That can't be true." "It is true," Emily replied gently. "Just like it's true that Tyler took out a second mortgage on your house without your knowledge, using a power of attorney that Dad apparently signed but doesn't remember signing." Robert's face paled. "There must be some explanation." "There is," Emily said. "The explanation is that Tyler has been lying and stealing for years, and you've both been so determined to see him as the golden child that you've ignored every red flag, rationalized every failure, excused every deception." "That's not fair," Sandra protested weakly. "Isn't it?" Emily turned down the heat under the sauce. "Mom, Dad, I love you both, but you've enabled Tyler's worst behaviors his entire life. You've taught him that he doesn't have to face consequences, that someone will always bail him out, clean up his messes, make excuses for him." "We were trying to support him," Robert said defensively. "There's a difference between support and enabling," Emily replied. "Support helps someone grow stronger, more capable, more independent. What you've done has kept Tyler dependent and stunted his moral development. He genuinely doesn't see anything wrong with defrauding elderly people out of their life savings. That's not normal, and it's not acceptable." Her parents exchanged troubled glances, the first hint that her words might be penetrating decades of denial. "What does Tyler have to do?" Sandra finally asked. "To avoid charges?" Emily explained her conditions. Tyler would need to make full restitution to his victims, find legitimate employment pay rent for the land his house stood on, and undergo financial counseling. Her parents listened in silence, the reality of their son's situation slowly sinking in. "And if he refuses," Robert asked quietly, "then I will provide my evidence to the authorities." Emily answered, her voice firm but compassionate. "I won't protect him from the consequences of his actions, and neither should you." Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "He's our son, Emily." "And I'm your daughter," Emily replied softly. But that didn't stop you from overlooking me my entire childhood, did it? From missing my achievements, my struggles, my needs, because Tyler always came first. The words hung in the air between them. Decades of unspoken hurt, finally given voice. We didn't mean to, Robert said, his voice breaking. We didn't see. We thought you were fine. You were always so capable, so independent. I had to be, Emily said, because no one was going to catch me if I fell. No one was going to fight my battles or solve my problems. Sandra reached for Emily's hand, her own trembling. I'm so sorry, Emily. We failed you. I can see that now. Emily accepted her mother's hand, feeling a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. I'm not asking for apologies, Mom. I've made peace with my childhood. What I'm asking for now is that you both see Tyler clearly not as the golden boy who needs protection, but as a troubled man who needs boundaries and accountability. Robert nodded slowly. We'll talk to him. Try to make him understand that this time is different. Thank you, Emily said. But understand that Tyler may not listen. He may choose the harder path. If he does, I need to know that you won't try to shield him from the consequences. Her parents looked at each other, decades of patterns and protective instincts visible in their exchange. Finally, Robert spoke. We'll try, Emily. It won't be easy, but we'll try. It wasn't a firm commitment, but it was progress. Emily turned back to her pasta, adding, Would you like to stay for dinner? There's plenty. To her surprise, they accepted. The meal that followed was stilted at first, but gradually eased into something approaching normal conversation. For the first time in years, Emily felt herself truly seen by her parents, not as an afterthought to Tyler's drama, but as a person in her own right. It was a small beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. After they left, Emily called Michael to update him. It sounds like a breakthrough, he said when she finished recounting the evening. Maybe, Emily replied, not wanting to hope for too much too soon. Old patterns are hard to break, but at least we're talking honestly for once. What about Tyler? Has he contacted you? Not yet, Emily said. I suspect he's strategizing his next move. Tyler's never been one to accept defeat gracefully. She was right. The next morning, Emily's phone rang early. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. Emily, he began without preamble when she answered, We need to talk face to face. I'm listening, Emily replied cautiously. Jessica and I have been up all night discussing your proposal. Tyler continued, his voice carefully controlled. We want to work something out, something that doesn't involve authorities or legal proceedings. Can you come to our house today, around noon? Emily hesitated, remembering the soup incident. I think a neutral location would be better. Please, Emily. Tyler's voice softened, taking on the persuasive tone she remembered from childhood, the voice that had talked their parents into countless exceptions and allowances. We're family. Let's handle this like family. Jessica's preparing lunch, just the three of us talking calmly like adults. Against her better judgment, Emily agreed. Fine, noon. But Tyler, if this is another attempt to manipulate me— It's not, he interrupted quickly. I promise. We just want to find a solution that works for everyone. After hanging up, Emily called James Morgan to update him on the situation. Be careful, the attorney advised. Your brother has a history of saying whatever is necessary to avoid consequences. If you do meet with him, I'd suggest recording the conversation. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so you'd need to inform him, but it might provide protection. Emily thanked him for the advice and spent the morning gathering copies of her documentation about ConsultEdge's activities. If Tyler was truly interested in making amends, he would need to understand exactly what she knew and what would be required to make it right. At precisely noon, Emily arrived at Tyler and Jessica's Newton home, a folder of documents under her arm and a small recording device in her pocket. She had decided to take James's advice, though she hoped the meeting wouldn't require such precautions. Jessica answered the door, her usual impeccable appearance slightly dimmed by signs of stress shadows under her eyes, hair less perfectly styled than normal. Emily, she greeted with a tight smile. Thank you for coming. Tyler's in the dining room. The house smelled of fresh bread and soup chicken noodle, Emily noted with irony, given the previous dinner's disaster. She followed Jessica through the expansive living area to the formal dining room where Tyler sat at the head of the table, examining something on his laptop. He stood when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. Emily, thanks for coming. He gestured to a chair at his right. Please sit down. Jessica's made lunch. Emily placed her folder on the table and took the offered seat. "Before we start, I should tell you that I'm recording this conversation," she said, removing the small device from her pocket and placing it on the table. "For everyone's protection." Tyler's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Of course. We have nothing to hide." Jessica brought in a tureen of soup and a basket of bread, serving each of them before taking her own seat at Tyler's left. An awkward silence fell as they began eating, no one quite ready to broach the real purpose of the meeting. Finally, Tyler set down his spoon. "Emily, I've had some time to think about what you said. About ConsultEdge and everything else." Emily waited, saying nothing, giving her brother space to continue. "You're right that things got out of hand," Tyler admitted, though his phrasing carefully avoided accepting full responsibility. "The business model became more aggressive than I initially intended. Some investors may have misunderstood the risk levels involved." "They didn't misunderstand anything, Tyler," Emily replied calmly. "You deliberately misled them. You promised guaranteed returns that you knew weren't possible." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "The investment market is complicated. Sometimes projections don't materialize as expected." "These weren't projections," Emily countered, opening her folder and sliding a document across the table. "This is a letter you sent to Martha Kavanaugh, age 79, promising her a 20% return on her investment within 6 months guaranteed. She invested her entire retirement savings, $145,000. That was 8 months ago. She hasn't received a penny back, and no one at ConsultEdge returns her calls." Tyler glanced at the letter, then pushed it away. "One dissatisfied client doesn't mean I have 12 more just like her," Emily interrupted, pulling out additional documents. "All elderly, all promised guaranteed returns, all ghosted when they asked about their money. That's not a business model, Tyler. It's fraud." Jessica interjected, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You make it sound so calculated. Tyler was trying to build something. Yes, there were optimistic projections, but the intention was always to deliver returns." "With what?" Emily asked. "ConsultEdge has no actual investments, no portfolio, no assets beyond the money you've collected." "Where did that money go, Tyler?" Her brother's gaze slid away from hers. "There were business expenses, office space, marketing staff salaries." "Your mortgage payments," Emily added. "Jessica's new Mercedes, vacations to the Hamptons and Aspen, designer furniture. I have the bank records, Tyler. I know exactly where the money went." Tyler's facade of contrition cracked, anger flashing in his eyes. "What do you want from me, Emily? To admit I'm a failure, that I've never been able to make anything work, that I've spent my life trying to live up to impossible expectations." "Whose expectations?" Emily asked, genuinely curious. "Mom and Dad never expected anything from you except that you be happy. They supported every venture, covered every mistake, celebrated every minor victory. If anyone grew up with impossible expectations, it was me." "That's not how it felt," Tyler shot back, his voice rising. "Do you know what it's like being the son of perfect parents, Dad, the successful engineer, Mom, the beloved teacher, both of them expecting me to find my calling like they did? And then there was you, little Emily, the genius acing every test, winning every competition. I was just average." Emily stared at her brother, astonished by his perspective. "You think I had it easy. You were the sun our family orbited around, Tyler. Every game, every need, every whim of yours took precedence over anything I accomplished or needed. I worked my way through college and medical school while you burned through 3 colleges on Mom and Dad's dime." Jessica stood abruptly. "This isn't productive. We invited you here to discuss solutions, not rehash childhood grievances." Emily took a deep breath, regaining her composure. "You're right. So let's talk solutions. What exactly are you proposing, Tyler?" Her brother exchanged a glance with Jessica before responding. "We want to make things right, but we need your help to do it." "What kind of help?" Emily asked warily. "Financial help," Tyler admitted. "We don't have the liquidity to repay the investors immediately, but with a loan of $500,000, we could not only make restitution, but also launch a legitimate business venture that I've been developing on the side." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Even now, faced with potential criminal charges, Tyler was still trying to get money from her. "Let me understand," she said slowly. "You want me to give you $500,000 so you can repay the people you defrauded with my money, then use what's left to start another business?" "It would be a loan, not a gift," Tyler clarified. "With interest. And this business concept is solid vetted by actual experts. It's a subscription-based health monitoring service for seniors using wearable technology. Despite herself, Emily was curious. You have a business plan market research. Extensive research. Tyler replied, clearly encouraged by her interest. The concept came from working with seniors through ConsultEdge, actually. I noticed a genuine need in the market. While you were defrauding them, Emily interjected. Tyler had the grace to look uncomfortable. Yes. Well, yet the point is, this is a legitimate business opportunity. One that could help me make things right and build something honest for once. Emily sat back studying her brother. Was this genuine remorse and a desire to change, or just another manipulation? The problem with habitual liars was that even their moments of apparent sincerity couldn't be trusted. Show me the business plan, she said finally. Tyler's face lit up. He turned his laptop toward her, opening a folder of professionally prepared documents, market analyses, product development timelines, financial projections. Emily scanned them with a surgeon's attention to detail, looking for inconsistencies or red flags. To her surprise, the plan actually seemed solid. The market need was real, the technology feasible, the financial projections conservative rather than wildly optimistic. If executed properly, such a business might actually succeed. Who prepared these documents? She asked. A consulting firm in Boston, Jessica answered. We spent $20,000 on the market research and business plan development. Emily raised an eyebrow. Investor money, Jessica had the decency to look away. Yes. At least it wasn't completely wasted, Emily muttered, continuing to review the materials. After several minutes, she closed the laptop and faced her brother. The plan looks viable, but that doesn't change the fact that you've committed fraud, Tyler. And I'm not giving you $500,000. Tyler's expression fell. Then what do you suggest we don't have the money to repay everyone? No, but you have assets, Emily replied. This house, for one. We can't sell our home, Jessica protested. You might not have a choice, Emily said firmly. The alternative is criminal charges, Jessica. If Tyler is convicted of fraud, especially fraud targeting the elderly, he's looking at years in prison. Is keeping this house worth that? The couple exchanged stricken looks, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. There might be another option, Emily continued, an idea forming as she spoke. The business plan for this senior health monitoring service, it has merit. What if I were to buy the concept from you, not as a loan but as a straight purchase of intellectual property? Tyler frowned. Buy it? Why would you want it? You're a surgeon, not a tech entrepreneur. I have contacts in the medical technology field, Emily explained. People who might be interested in developing this concept properly ethically. I could negotiate a fair price for the intellectual property, say $200,000. The projected value is much higher, Jessica began. The projected value assumes successful execution, which requires trust, Emily interrupted. Given Tyler's track record, $200,000 for an undeveloped concept is more than fair. That money would go directly to repaying the investors who were defrauded, starting with the most vulnerable. Tyler considered the offer, his expression calculating. And the rest of the restitution. You sell your luxury cars, Jessica's designer handbag collection, whatever other assets you can liquidate, Emily said bluntly. You downsize to a home you can actually afford. You find legitimate employment, Tyler, something with a regular paycheck while you rebuild your reputation. And the land underneath this house, Tyler asked, your inheritance. Emily had been considering this question since receiving her grandfather's letter. I'll transfer ownership of the land to you on one condition: that you sell this house, use the proceeds to finish making restitution to your victims, and start fresh somewhere more modest. Tyler and Jessica stared at her in shock. You'd give up the land? Tyler asked incredulously. I don't want your house, Tyler, Emily replied. I don't want to be your landlord or hold power over you indefinitely. What I want is for you to make things right and break this cycle of deception and entitlement. Selling this house, this monument to living beyond your means, would be a concrete step toward actual change. Jessica looked as if she might cry. But we've put so much into this house. The custom kitchen, the landscaping, all purchased with stolen money, Emily reminded her gently. Money that belonged to elderly people who trusted Tyler with their life savings. People who can't afford the luxuries you've surrounded yourselves with. A heavy silence fell over the table. Finally, Tyler spoke, his voice subdued. And if we agree to all this, selling the house, liquidating assets, me finding a regular job, you'll transfer the land to us and not pursue criminal charges. I'll need more than verbal agreement, Emily replied. I'll need to see actual steps taken, the house listed for sale, restitution payments beginning to flow to victims' job applications submitted, and you'll need to sign a legally binding agreement outlining all these conditions drafted by my attorney. Tyler nodded slowly, the fight gone from his posture. I understand. And Tyler, Emily added, this is your last chance. If you renege on our agreement, if you start another scheme or try to weasel out of your obligations, I won't hesitate to provide all my evidence to the authorities, no matter what Mom and Dad say, no matter how they try to intervene. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Tyler replied, meeting her gaze directly for perhaps the first time in their adult lives. Emily stood gathering her folder and recording device. I'll have James draft the agreement. We can meet at his office to sign it once you've had time to review it with your own attorney. As she prepared to leave, Tyler called after her, Emily, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for Consult Edge, but for everything. For being the favorite. For not seeing what that cost you. Emily paused, surprised by what seemed like genuine remorse. It wasn't your fault that Mom and Dad favored you, Tyler. That was their choice. What was your choice was how you used that favoritism to avoid responsibility to take without giving back to expect rescue instead of learning from mistakes. I know, Tyler said quietly. I want to be better. I just don't know if I know how. For the first time in years, Emily felt a flicker of genuine compassion for her brother, not as the golden child who had overshadowed her, but as a deeply flawed person who had never developed the skills to navigate life honestly. It starts with accepting reality, she told him. No more magical thinking, no more get-rich-quick schemes, no more believing you're entitled to success without effort. Just ordinary day-by-day responsibility and honesty. Tyler nodded, a vulnerability in his expression that Emily had rarely seen. I'll try. Good, Emily replied. Because despite everything, you're still my brother, and I'd rather see you succeed honestly than fail spectacularly. With that, she left feeling lighter than she had in days. Whether Tyler would follow through remained to be seen, but she had done what she could to offer both consequences and airfully making notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. It's an elegant solution, he said when she finished. Provides a path to restitution without complete destruction, but also ensures real consequences. Harold would approve. I hope so, Emily replied. I'm still not entirely sure Tyler will follow through, but at least I've given him the chance. And what about you? James asked. What will you do with the Cape Cod property and your grandfather's house now that the Newton land issue is resolved? Emily hadn't given it much thought, having been so focused on the Tyler situation. I'm not sure yet. Keep them, I suppose. The Cape house would make a lovely weekend retreat, and I can't imagine selling Granddad's house. It holds too many memories. James nodded, understanding. Real estate in this area is only going to appreciate. They're solid investments regardless of your personal attachment. As they finished their meeting, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Lunch today, just the two of us. There's something I want to discuss. Emily hesitated, then replied affirmatively. She was scheduled to fly back to Baltimore the next day, and there were still conversations to be had with her parents, particularly about their role in enabling Tyler's behavior. Sandra Wilson was already seated at a quiet corner table in a small cafe near the public garden when Emily arrived. Her mother looked tired, but composed a small gift bag sitting on the table beside her water glass. Thank you for coming, Sandra said as Emily took a seat. I wasn't sure you would. Why wouldn't I? Emily asked. Sandra gave her a sad smile. After everything that's happened, after all the years of, neglect, I suppose, I wouldn't have blamed you for avoiding me. Emily studied her mother, noting the new lines around her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands. I don't avoid difficult conversations, Mom. My job requires facing hard truths every day. Yes, I suppose it does, Sandra agreed. Tyler called us last night, told us about your proposal, about selling the house, finding regular employment, making restitution. And, Emily prompted when her mother fell silent. And your father and I think it's fair, Sandra said, surprising Emily. More than fair, actually. We were prepared for much worse after what James showed us. You've spoken with James? Emily hadn't expected this. Sandra nodded. We met with him this morning. He showed us the full extent of Tyler's activities, the elderly victims, the misappropriated funds. It was devastating to see the truth laid out so clearly. Emily waited, giving her mother space to continue. "We failed him," Sandra said softly. "Not in the way you might think, not by being too harsh or demanding, but by being too indulgent, by protecting him from consequences, by making excuses instead of setting boundaries." "Yes," Emily agreed simply. "You did." Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "And we failed you too. In a different way, but perhaps more profoundly. We took your strength and independence for granted. We assumed you didn't need us because you seemed so capable, so self-sufficient." "I learned to be self-sufficient because I had to be," Emily pointed out. "Because no one was going to fight my battles or celebrate my victories." "I know," Sandra whispered. "I see that now. Too late perhaps, but I do see it." She pushed the small gift bag toward Emily. "This won't make up for anything, but I wanted you to have it." Curious, Emily opened the bag and removed a small velvet jewelry box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. "It was your grandmother's," Sandra explained. "Harold's wife, Elizabeth. He gave it to me when Robert and I married, but I think it should be yours. Elizabeth was a doctor too, you know, a pediatrician. You have her spirit, her determination, and compassion." Emily carefully lifted the locket from its box, unexpectedly moved by the connection to the grandmother she had barely known. Elizabeth Wilson had died when Emily was only 4, leaving only vague memories of a gentle voice and the scent of lavender. "Thank you," she said, fastening the chain around her neck. "This means a lot to me." "There's something else," Sandra continued, her voice steadier now. "Your father and I have been talking. About Tyler, about you, about our role in all of this." She took a deep breath. "We've decided to sell our house." Emily frowned in confusion. "Sell your house? Why?" "To help make restitution," Sandra explained. "The second mortgage Tyler took out has put us underwater anyway. We found a smaller place, a condo closer to town. The proceeds from the sale will help repay some of the people Tyler defrauded." "Mom, you don't have to do that," Emily protested. "Tyler's actions aren't your responsibility." "Yes, they are," Sandra countered firmly. "Not legally, perhaps, but morally. We enabled his behavior for decades. We looked the other way when we should have been holding him accountable. If we hadn't, perhaps he wouldn't have gone so far down this path." Emily was stunned by her mother's clarity and resolve. "What does Dad say about this?" "It was his idea," Sandra said with a small smile. "Your father has always been more perceptive than I gave him credit for. Once the blinders came off regarding Tyler, he saw everything very clearly." They talked through lunch, covering decades of family history with new honesty. For the first time, Emily felt her mother truly seeing her, not just her accomplishments, but her struggles, her loneliness, her resilience in the face of family dysfunction. As they prepared to leave, Sandra hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider coming home for Christmas this year? Not to our old house. We'll be in the condo by then, but as a family. A fresh start of sorts." Emily considered the invitation. Past holidays with her family had been exercises in invisibility, with Tyler invariably at the center of attention. But perhaps things really were changing. "I'll think about it," she promised. "A lot depends on how seriously Tyler takes this opportunity to make amends." Sandra nodded, understanding. "That's fair. Just know that whatever Tyler does or doesn't do, your father and I want to rebuild our relationship with you, if you're willing to give us that chance." Emily hugged her mother goodbye, surprised by how natural it felt after years of awkward, perfunctory embraces. Something had shifted between them, a wall crumbling, a bridge beginning to form across years of misunderstanding and neglect. That evening, as Emily packed for her return to Baltimore, she received a text from Tyler with a photo attachment. The image showed a for sale sign in front of his Newton house. The message read simply, "First step. I mean it this time." Emily stared at the image, cautiously hopeful, yet wary of being manipulated again. She forwarded the photo to James with a brief message asking him to verify that the house was actually listed with a reputable agency. Trust but verify another of her grandfather's principles. As she finished packing, Emily found herself standing in Harold's study, her study now surrounded by the books and mementos of his remarkable life. She ran her fingers along the spines of medical texts, some dating back to his student days, others more recent publications he had contributed to. On his desk sat the photograph of them together at her medical school graduation, both beaming with pride and accomplishment. Beside it, she now placed the locket containing a tiny photograph of Elizabeth Wilson, creating a visual link between generations of healers in the Wilson family. "I think I got it right, Granddad," she said softly to the empty room. The balance between justice and mercy, between holding Tyler accountable and giving him a chance to change. The house creaked gently around her, a comforting sound that seemed to offer approval. In this space, Emily had always felt seen and valued. Now perhaps she could carry that feeling with her, no longer defined by childhood invisibility, but by the strength and wisdom it had forced her to develop. 3 years later, the Cape Cod property gleamed in the June sunshine, its weathered shingles and white trim freshly restored after a careful renovation. Emily stood on the deck overlooking the bay, a glass of lemonade in hand, watching Michael man the grill while chatting with her father. Robert Wilson, now 73, looked healthier than he had in years, the strain of enabling Tyler's schemes replaced by the quiet contentment of a simpler life. Sandra emerged from the house carrying a platter of corn on the cob, followed by Tyler's 7-year-old daughter Emma, who was carefully balancing a bowl of salad. The little girl's tongue poked out in concentration as she navigated the deck steps. "Careful, Emma," Emily called. "No rush." "I got it, Aunt Emily," the child replied seriously. "Daddy says I'm the best helper." Emily smiled, still getting used to being Aunt Emily after years of minimal contact with her brother's family. The past 3 years had brought changes she could never have anticipated on that fateful weekend in Boston. Tyler had indeed sold the Newton house using the proceeds to make restitution to his victims as promised. He and Jessica had moved into a modest apartment where the adjustment to a drastically reduced lifestyle had ultimately ended their marriage. Jessica, unwilling to accept financial constraints, had left for California within the year. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Tyler had discovered an aptitude for sales in his new position at a legitimate medical supply company. Starting in an entry-level role, he had worked his way up to regional sales manager through genuine effort rather than shortcuts or schemes. The intellectual property for the senior health monitoring system that Emily had purchased from Tyler had indeed proved valuable. Working with colleagues at Johns Hopkins, she had helped develop it into a successful product now used in assisted living facilities across the country. The profits from her investment had funded the Harold Wilson Memorial Scholarship, providing full tuition for medical students from disadvantaged backgrounds. "Penny for your thoughts," Michael said, joining her at the railing. They had married the previous fall in a small ceremony in her grandfather's garden. "Just reflecting on how much has changed," Emily replied, leaning into him. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined being here with all of them actually enjoying family time. Michael slipped an arm around her waist. "Your grandfather would be proud, not just of your professional success, but of how you handled everything with Tyler and your parents. You broke the cycle, Em." "We all did," Emily corrected, watching as Tyler joined them on the deck, carrying drinks for the others. Her brother caught her eye and raised his glass in a small salute of acknowledgement. Their relationship would never be uncomplicated. Too much history lay between them for that, but it had evolved into something resembling mutual respect. Tyler had finally grown up accepting responsibility for his actions and working to make amends not just financially but emotionally as well. "Food's ready," Robert called, and the family gathered around the table on the deck. As they settled in to eat, Emily felt the weight of her grandmother's locket against her skin. She wore it always now, a reminder of the medical legacy she had inherited and extended. Beside her, Michael squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of the moment's significance. Emily looked around the table at her assembled family, imperfect healing trying. The invisible girl had become a visible woman, strong enough to hold her family accountable and compassionate enough to offer them a path to redemption. In the distance, the bay sparkled under the summer sun, sailboats dotting the horizon like possibilities waiting to be explored. Emily raised her glass. "To family," she said simply. "The one we're born with and the one we choose. To family." The others echoed, even little Emma with her cup of juice. As the meal progressed, filled with conversation and laughter, Emily thought of her grandfather's words from his letter. True healing cannot come without accountability. He had been right, as he so often was. The painful confrontations 3 years ago had cleared the way for authentic connection, allowing them all to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time. Later, as the sun began to set over the water, Emily stood alone on the beach, watching the changing colors paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Michael joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "Happy?" he asked. Emily nodded, the peace she felt too deep for simple words. She was more than happy she was whole, no longer defined by childhood invisibility or adult resentment, but by the woman she had chosen to become. A woman who could heal bodies as a surgeon and relationships as a daughter, sister, wife. Granddad used to say that a good life isn't measured by the absence of storms, but by how well you sail through them, she told Michael, watching the last fishing boats return to harbor. I think we're sailing pretty well now. As darkness fell, they walked back toward the house, its windows glowing with welcoming light. Inside, Emily's family waited, not perfect, but present. Not idealized, but real. The journey hadn't been easy, but standing here now, Emily wouldn't have changed it. Every storm, every struggle had brought her to this moment of clarity and purpose. The invisible girl had finally stepped fully into the light, bringing her family with her into a future built on truth, accountability, and the courage to begin again. The end.